In various passages in the Bible, we see cases of extraordinary demonic attacks. Today, these attacks continue in different forms and intensity. What makes people vulnerable to such attacks? Let's find out what are the elements that attract extraordinary demonic attacks. I'm Veronica Baloy Jimenez and welcome to Who's Calling? Man is intrinsically good, but because he is exposed to a lot of temptations of the world, he easily falls into sin. When a person has fallen deeply into sin, he becomes open to extraordinary diabolical attacks. There are also instances when choosing to sin could be related to a trauma experienced by the person. Melanie, not her real name, relates to us how it became easy for her to choose to live a sinful life.
Nag-umpisa akong magtrabaho, 17 or 18 ako noon, nagpunta na ako ng Japan. Hanggang sa 30 years old ako, nagtatrabaho ako sa ganong trabaho, sa club. Nagtrabaho kasi ako sa isang KTV, yung parang nag-i-entertain kami ng mga guests sa club. Pinapainom namin sila, binubola namin sila, hanggang sa may mga indecent proposal na nagaganap. Yung madami silang i-propose sa'yo na I will give you money, so just come to my hotel. Yung mga ganon, yung dahil sa sobrang materialistic ka, dahil gusto mong matulungan yung family, hindi mo na naiisip kung ano yung good or bad. Yung iniisip mo na lang is how you survive and how you reach your dream, na mapag-aral ko yung mga kapatid ko, magkaroon kami ng magandang buhay. Kaya nga nandun na yung to the point na talagang yung pangarap ko lang is wala na akong ibang pangarap kundi mag-asawa ng 4 na matandang mayaman and madaling mamatay.
Because of her sinful lifestyle, Melanie says some of her experiences traumatized her.
Madami akong traumatic experience about sa love din kasi nasubukan ko din ma-in love, but not just only in love, there is still money involved dun sa in love na yon. Hindi lang na in love ako, pero may kasama pa ding money matter. Pero dumating yung point na meron akong sobrang na in love ako sa isang guy, tinanggal niya ako sa trabaho. Sabi niya kasi he will support me, pero at the end of the day, hindi din niya kinontinue yung support. So parang naging suicidal ako noon. Gusto ko nang mamatay noon kasi hiyang-hiya na akong babalik dun sa dati kong work.
Father Jose Francisco Syquia is head of the Exorcism Ministry of the Archdiocese of Manila. He explains how sin can open us to extraordinary diabolical attacks. Father, we've seen cases of people experiencing diabolical attacks. What makes these people open to such attacks?
Well, in our ministry of exorcism, usually we find 4 major causes of why people become open to this type of extraordinary demonic attacks, like possession, oppression, obsession, and also infestation. The first is there is obstinacy in sinfulness. The person is so deep into sin that spirits tend to latch onto him, and as they become more and more numerous and more powerful, they start to harass a person in a more intense manner. Another is a traumatic event when the person was especially young. The person experiences something very negative in such a way that it causes so much, we may say, emotional negativity and heaviness in the person's life. Okay? And that's where spirits attach.
Trauma is the emotional response of a person as a result of an intensely stressful incident or circumstance that exceeds one's ability to cope. What sort of trauma can open a person to extraordinary diabolical attacks?
Well, Veronica, usually it is the type of trauma that is really repetitive and really something that causes deep woundedness in the person, especially if it happened when the person was still a child. And usually these are abuses. It could be physical, but we have encountered more sexual abuses. It can also be verbal abuse. And because of that, it causes what we may say some deep anger in the person, or a deep loneliness, sadness, and even fears. And because of that, because it is not dealt with immediately, there is no, what we may say, processing, or the child is not, protected and is bombarded by these elements, these attacks. Then the child grows up with all this negativity that becomes a very big opening to the diabolical spirits.
Some of the effects of trauma could be so severe that they interfere with a person's normal life. There are many sources of trauma, including rape, domestic violence, natural disasters, severe illness or injury, death of a loved one, and witnessing an act of violence. When a person is traumatized and is not able to get professional help, he may experience short-term and long-term effects such as anxiety, depression, and mood swings.
The negativity becomes even deeper, and it leads to depression, or a deep sadness. It leads to a lot of anger, hatred, and unforgiveness, and a lot of fears, anxiety, what we call obsessive thoughts, paranoia. So the devil builds up, and if on this woundedness, he aggravates and attaches and aggravates them.
And you also mentioned that sin could be a big opening
Yes.
for diabolical attacks. How does that work?
Well, St. John, in the first letter of John, we see him speaking about a person who is in sin, is like a child of the devil, because if we die in sin, basically in mortal sin, we cannot enter into heaven. Okay, we fall under the kingdom of the evil one. Now, sin, of course, we know is the greatest opening, because there is no protection even in the soul of the person. So if the person continues to sin again and again, and there is no grace in the soul of the person, then demons are attracted to that sinfulness and that vacuum in the person. Okay? And the sinfulness that the person continues, the sin that the person continues to do, attracts more and more spirits. So they come in, they're attracted to sin, and they aggravate it so that it becomes a vice. Okay? For example, continues to habitually do these sins, these spirits will possess them. And therefore, that is something that we have always to keep in mind.
Melanie became depressed after her boyfriend left her and she began to get sick. She also started to have diabolical experiences.
May sakit na ako noon, nung mga panahon na yon, pero patuloy pa din akong gumagawa kasi kailangan namin, kasi hindi na ako nakakapagtrabaho. Kasi nagiging on and off yung sakit ko, hindi talaga siya yung araw-araw na dire-diretso. Pero yun nga, dumating na yung time na I got possessed.
Melanie consulted a doctor, but she found no cure. One of her friends advised her to see a witch doctor.
Kung unang pinuntahan kong albularyo, hindi naman ako naging okay kasi nandun pa din kami sa bahay na infested. Nagpunta ulit ako sa albularyo, isang albularyo, tapos naging parang hindi na ako naniwala sa albularyo kasi parang mas lalo akong lumala, and then dumating din yung time na parang inaway ko yung albularyo kasi parang lumala ako. Tapos ulit, punta ulit kami ng ibang albularyo hanggang sa umabot na kami ng 9 na albularyo. Nag-iba na yung mga itsura ko. Nangitim na yung buong katawan ko, tapos minamanas na ako, nalalagas na yung buhok ko. Tapos, basta iba na talaga siya. Tapos yung mindset ko, suicidal thoughts na, puro sinful na lang, puro last na lang yung ginagawa ko nung after kong mag-albularyo.
Depressed and frustrated because of her worsening situation, Melanie began having suicidal thoughts.
Many of our cases had suicidal thoughts, voices or thoughts, strong thoughts that would tell them to commit suicide. So we have many cases of people who were actually being, they thought that these thoughts were coming from themselves when actually it was a diabolical spirit that was inserting these thoughts or these voices into their imagination or into their faculties, their hearing faculties. Okay? Knowing the woundedness of the person, say, you're worthless, he bombards the person, the memory to remember again and again, what happened, and then to remind the person he is worthless. And then, the only way out is, to commit suicide. Okay? To free yourself, and, you'll be freed from all of that. But of course, we know that is not true. Because if the person dies in that state, then he cannot enter into heaven. So, the devil will continue to bombard the person, and will, especially when there is hopelessness.
Up next,
They think it's a game, but actually it's an instrument found in witchcraft to communicate with with powers, okay? Of course, not of God.
trauma victims may seek medical or psychological treatment to prevent deterioration of their well-being. However, if the person has begun experiencing diabolical attacks, he may need spiritual intervention.
But this can be prevented by the person who experienced a trauma?
Well, yes, if for example the person is immediately given some form of help, like for example a child who is abused immediately is able to experience a very loving environment, okay, a support system.
You said that many of your cases were because of trauma. What percentage of that, like here in the Philippines?
1 out of 3 of our cases experience extraordinary diabolical attacks because of trauma. That's why maybe before, like here in the Philippines, we didn't see so many cases of possession. Although there was a lot of occult contamination, there were no really dysfunctional families. That was rare. The family was still a very supportive environment. So we see that even though the demons could have come in through the occult, they would have a very difficult time manifesting and really harassing and possessing people precisely because of these other safeguards. Even the social media, they are bullied and experience so much hatred and negativity. And the faith is not anymore the center of the family.
Father Syquia adds that other sins may also open people to extraordinary diabolical attacks.
For example, Father, the sin of adultery, we see a lot of people committing adultery and it's coming out to be like a normal thing.
Yes.
These people are opening themselves up to
Yes.
extraordinary diabolical attacks.
Yes, but actually if they continue in the sin first and foremost, the devil will not immediately manifest himself. So what the devil will do is he will first and foremost make them fall into this sin more and more until there is really a stronghold and it's almost impossible for them to get out, okay, without the grace of God. And little by little, the devil will attack them in other ways. But they would see that their spiritual life, of course, is already destroyed. Their emotional life, their relational life, their psychological life will be also affected.
Father Joseph says an important antidote to the excessive attacks of the evil one is the sacrament of confession.
When the Lord forgives us through the sacrament of confession, the devil loses its hold over the soul of the person, but not necessarily the spirits attach the body. It's not necessary that the spirits are expelled. That's why a person can live so long in sin, then go to confession, and he experiences so many blocks in order for him to start to live a real life in Christ throughout the years when he was not yet going to confession. And therefore, that is where this ministry of exorcism comes in and the use of sacramentals and prayers of liberation.
He explains that the practice of paganism and the occult also provides an opening for the evil spirits to attack a person. A big number of Filipinos go to witch doctors, fortune tellers, and geomancers and continue to practice feng shui and other new age rituals.
Okay, occult contamination, that means that a person tries to merge his faith with paganism or pagan practices. Like here in the Philippines, the person practices all these superstitious practices. For example, you are a person who is a Catholic, but you use crystals for healing, or you use pendulums, or you use magnets, these things. They allow these spirits attached to occultism or occult practices to come into their lives. So for example, a group of children will start to play the Ouija board. So they think it's a game, but actually it's an instrument found in witchcraft to communicate with with powers, right? Of course, not of God.
Father Joseph reminds us about the church's teachings on paganism.
In the early church, they were very strict about paganism because pagan practices and the pagan gods were always seen by the church as diabolical in nature.
Like offering to nature?
Offering to nature because they believe that nature is divine.
Yeah.
It is simply it is God or an emanation of God. And of course, that is pantheism. That is not real. That is not true because God is different. The Creator is different from the creature. Okay? There is always a distinction. Well, superstitious beliefs, because they are remnants of pagan practices, therefore that's why they are dangerous. Because once we do these superstitious practices, which are rituals which our ancestors did before they became Catholic.
Melanie has undergone exorcism through the help of the Office of Exorcism at the Archdiocese of Manila. She has vowed to transform her life and to turn away from sin.
Yung alam mo yung maglalakad ka lang, yung sisit-sitan ka pa nila, tapos kung ano-ano yung isisigaw sa'yo. Pero for now na nakilala ko na si Jesus Christ, I feel the respect of people around me. Hindi na ako yung dating, alam mo yung sisit-sitan ka lang. But I told you before kanina na, yes, I experienced the temptation na paglabas ko sa simbahan, maayos yung damit ko. Yung bababaan ka ng sasakyan, it's a part of temptation. It's a part of devil na ma-deceive ka ulit na, I look formal naman, bakit ganon? Bakit may mga humihinto pa rin sa sakyan? It's just part of the devil na gusto akong i-deceive. Kung wala tayong respect sa sarili natin, what more yung ibang tao, hindi tayo i-respect. So, yung respect, minsan kapag yung the way tayo manamit or the way tayo mag-act, dun kasi lalabas yung respeto ng mga tao, how they respect us. Kaya talagang mahalaga din how we carry ourselves kasi isang disappointment natin yun kapag hindi tayo nakakakuha ng respect ng tao. So parang masasaktan din tayo.
Up next,
And what is the most potent potion or solution to all these extraordinary diabolical attacks?
Well, the most important thing first is the grace in the soul. And
Melanie says that although it is a constant struggle for her to resist temptation, she knows that she has chosen the better path of being faithful to her promises to God.
My heart is really commit to the Lord. Kaya naiintindihan ko na yung mga temptation na yun is just a temptation kasi the devil want me to go back to the old me. But I thank God na God not allow me to do it again. Inopen ni Lord yung puso ko. Kaya hindi ako nag-doubt or nag-alinlangan na okay, I'll go for this again kasi kailangan ulit namin ng pera. I trust to the Lord na He will provide. Kaya talagang hindi na ako bumalik sa ganong klaseng gawain. Nung mga panahon na yon, basta ang mahalaga sa akin nun, masustain ko yung needs namin as a family, masustain ko yung needs ko. Wala pa yung guilt feeling na lumalabas sa puso ko.
Father Syquia warns that the devil is the father of lies. That is why we must all be wary when we make our choices in life.
it's very important first and foremost to be able to learn, right? Because the devil is a master deceiver, he's the greatest liar. And he will not come in the form of a demon. He will always come in the form of, as we see in the Bible, an angel of light. Right? And therefore, we have to be able to know the truth about these things. That's why, because many people don't know that don't know about these openings, and therefore they think that it is, it's okay to develop this, my mind, the powers of my mind, etc., without thinking, what does our faith say about it? Therefore, the person, because of this ignorance, becomes open to diabolical attacks. So the important thing is getting to know first and foremost what are the ways of the devil, his strategies, how he enters into our life, and then knowing how to now counter it with the weapons of light and the armor, wearing the armor of light, as Saint Paul would say. We should never belittle sin. We should see sin as God sees it. Because imagine if these pure spirits, who were not tempted in any way, didn't have concupiscence, and were not tempted by the spirit of the world, 1/3 of them fell into hell. Much more do we need the grace of God as human beings, where we are fallen in our nature, where we are tempted by the devil, and where we are also attacked by the spirit of the world, or what we call the values of Satan that the world has adopted. So the more we have to try to remove that desensitization towards sin, we have to see sin as God sees it. That He sent His only Son to die on the cross. That is what sin is to God.
Father Joseph adds that even during prayer, the devil can inject evil thoughts that would disrupt our conversations with God.
The devil is instigating that person to
Yes.
commit suicide or maybe to sin some more.
Yes.
So we should realize that if like we're thinking of doing something bad, or evil, or sinful, it's really the devil.
Yes, the devil can put those thoughts easily, especially St. Ignatius would say, if you're not thinking of anything and suddenly this thought comes into your mind that is very blasphemous or sacrilegious, that is always from the evil one. Because of course we know when it's many people, they believe it comes from themselves. That's why they believe it is true. When actually these are simply thoughts or voices that are implanted in the person, which comes from outside, which comes from the evil one, and which you can actually, counter with the Word of God. That's why when you're praying and you experience an inspiration, for example, a beautiful inspiration while you are praying, that's from the good angel. But when suddenly you're praying, the farthest thing from your mind is anything sacrilegious, and suddenly something pops into your mind, your imagination, okay? Then that is something that is diabolical.
What do you do to stop all these?
Well, usually we direct ourselves back to the prayer in peace. We don't allow it to agitate us because the devil will more see that it's effective, that way of disturbing you in prayer, and therefore the more he will attack you that way. And also, if you see that it continues, then you can use the sacramentals. Like, for example, holy water and commanding the spirit in the name of Jesus to depart. Okay, so that the spirit departs, and then you can continue to pray.
Father Joseph points out the difference between a possessed person and a person who is just psychologically imbalanced.
Well, basically, through the interviews, we also check what interventions the person already tried. We check the interviews. Did the person do something occult before this happened? And usually, if it is something that is diabolical, the person is normal at certain points of the day, and then later on with the diabolical attacks, that's when he becomes, seemingly eccentric or psychotic. The person is simply psychologically ill. There's some form of nonsensical element to it. But if you're dealing with a person who is diabolically attacked, when he's not at that moment being diabolically attacked, you can actually talk to him like a normal person. Right? You can connect. He has a normal job.
How then can a person, especially a victim of trauma, avoid being attacked by diabolical spirits?
The most important thing first is the grace in the soul, and to know about spiritual warfare, in the sense that we have to understand the war that St. Paul reminds us continually, okay, when we read the Gospels, that there is really this spiritual war that is going on, and that becoming aware, okay, that the most important, the strongest armor is always the grace in the soul, being in the state of grace, and having the virtues, because that means my faculties are protected because I live the virtues of Christ in me. Okay? So not only be in the state of grace, but the best armor is a life of virtue. And also, not only that, of course, making use of the sacraments in order to grow in the grace in our soul, because the more the grace is what we call enlivened in my soul, okay, the more the devil gets burned when he tries to approach me. Just as with the saints, when they would approach the saint, a demoniac, the demon will immediately react.
Father Joseph advises everyone to continue praying not only to God but also to Mother Mary, to the saints and archangels. He says the use of the sacramentals of the Church and the prayer of liberation will help ward off evil spirits.
Lord, what are you showing me in all this? What is it that you're asking of me? Because if you permitted this, that means that there is something that you desire to teach me. That means that there is something that you desire from me that you want me to purify or to strengthen. And then ask for the grace for the Lord to give you that gift of discernment. And when the Lord shows you, then you respond. Ask for the grace to respond.
The New Testament describes demons as invaders of territories that they do not own. They may continuously try to attack us through our traumatic experiences and sins. But as long as we surrender everything to God and live in a state of grace, Satan can never win. Our Bible verse for this week is from Psalm 91, verse 4-6. Under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. Thank you so much for watching. For comments and suggestions, you may visit our Facebook page. Join us again next week for another exciting episode on Who's Calling? This has been Veronica Baluit Jimenez saying everything is possible with God when we call on Him. May God bless us all.